Is editing part of photography? Do you have to shoot raw? And is ISO part of exposure? These three questions at least partly belong together. I'm Amri, and in this controversial video I will tell you why. I will edit this image and get from here to there, all within Lightroom. Most of you will probably think, now he lost his mind. Well, that is correct without a doubt. It doesn't necessarily have to do with this video. I took this shot after a beautiful hike in the Austrian mountains with my wife. We spent way too much time up there because the scenery was so beautiful. And we took images like these. It was meant to be location scouting rather than shooting, and so we didn't have a tripod with us. On our way down, we passed this scenery and it was almost pitch dark. Something came to my mind that I long wanted to do. It is a very controversial thing. Many of you know I literally hate the exposure triangle because it is missing the most important part of exposure, which is scene brightness, but it lists ISO, which is in fact not a part of exposure. ISO is the gain that is applied by your camera after the image is taken. In case that is too much for you to grasp, I'm already preparing a video about exposure that will blow your mind. So you might want to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications, clicking on the bell. That will change the way you see photography forever. It will be nowhere near as confusing as this video and make you finally understand all the camera settings. I'll publish it within the next few weeks. I just need to record a few more scenes for which I need to meet certain conditions. Okay, back to our image. Instead of setting the ISO very high in camera, I wanted to show you one thing. In many modern cameras, the difference between raising ISO in camera versus increasing image brightness or raising it in your editing software is very little regard to image noise. So raising the brightness in, for example, Lightroom will only create marginally more noise than raising ISO in camera. But the difference will be massive in regard to what is called dynamic range in an image. Let me show you something. Let's have a look at this image, which was shot early on that day, right at sunset. You may say it is nicely exposed. Well, yes, if you don't like editing at all. But let me show you this. If I drag the brightness slider, Lightroom calls it the exposure slider, all the way down, and also the highlight slider and the whites, I still get this ugly gray blotch there. That's because this area is overexposed despite the rest of the image being correctly exposed. Even if you take a look at this image, out of camera it looks underexposed. But let me drag the sliders all the way down again. There is still quite a big area completely without information. You cannot bring that back. All you can get is this. And that is not what you saw on location, because our eyes, or better said our brain, adapts really well to different brightness levels and shows us the full range. Well, almost. So what can we do? Or in other words, what do many, particularly landscape photographers do? They expose an image for the highlights to be able to get the best out of an image, for example in Lightroom, and get it close to what you've seen on location. Well, and admittedly, even beyond that. Keeping that in mind, let's now start editing our image. This in fact is a little too extreme, but I chose it to open your mind a bit. Shooting that about one stop brighter would have been the perfect start. Okay, let's start the edit. First I will bring the exposure up and the shadows. But now we have already completely lost the beautiful colors in the sky again. This would be roughly the image we would have got when we exposed the image correctly. Let me show you the before and the after. That is not what we want. So it's time to use Lightroom's most powerful tool, the adjustment brush. I dedicated 2 videos to exactly that topic, so I will not go into much detail in this video. I will select the brush tool up here and start painting in the sky. If you cannot see anything, hit the O key for overlay and you will get an info where exactly you painted on. Now I see that I not only painted on the sky, but also on the mountains. Do we want that? Nope. So let's delete the brush and start new. But before I start brushing again, I check this super fantastic auto mask box. If I now paint over it again, you will see that I only paint on the sky. I will paint around the edge of the sky. Let me quickly fast forward that. Okay, the edges are done. Now I choose a bigger brush, no feather, and uncheck the auto mask to paint over the rest of the sky. Again, fast forward. Here we go. I will hit the O key to get rid of the overlay and reduce the brightness of the sky by dragging the exposure slider to the left. And what we see is that we've been pretty sloppy with our selection, or mask if you wish. So I zoom in, choose my smaller brush again with a big feather radius and do some fine tuning. But before I do that, I will turn the auto mask on again to not paint over the mountain. On a side note, did you check my shirt? I just opened an online shop for photography shirts, so if you want to support me, check the link in the description. Okay, over here you see an ugly line and the image is pretty blurry. You may wonder why. The line comes from a mix of different lens errors that happened due to me shooting a very wide lens at the lowest possible f number. If you watched our photography course, you know by now that the best possible image quality can be achieved at around f11. But since I didn't have a tripod, I couldn't go that high without introducing motion blur due to a slow shutter speed. The latter was 1/110th, by the way. Very low and risky. But I took a few shots in burst mode to make sure one of them is sharp. That's something I often recommend. If your shutter speed is critically low and you don't want to raise ISO or can't lower the aperture number anymore, just take more images. The likelihood that one among many motion blurred shots is sharp is pretty high. Okay, back to Lightroom. To reduce that ugly effect, I'm now going to use a big brush with a big feather, unselect the auto mask and paint only with the feather over the edge. That gets us a nice and beautiful transition. Now I will bring the exposure of the adjustment brush up a bit, the highlights down, and the shadows up to brighten the area where I painted over the edge. And now I can actually close the adjustment brush to fine-tune the rest of the image. First of all, it is way too blue for my taste. Sunset images have that warm sun-kissed look, so I will raise the color temperature. Now it's pretty green, so I will raise the tint. It also looks a bit dull, so let me just raise vibrance and saturation. Then with landscapes, I like to raise the clarity to add some so-called local contrast. And that looks pretty cool now. I hope you like the image as much as I do, but for those who like the kind of Instagram style, let me quickly introduce you to the profiles in Lightroom. They quickly change the look of your image. One of my favorites is Modern 8. Again, more on that in our free Lightroom course. I will link all the videos in the description, along with a new Instagram account I just created, so maybe you want to have a look. If I zoom in, I see quite a bit of noise, so I'll reduce that now. Down in the details section, I raise the luminance noise slider and add some masking to the sharpness because I don't want to sharpen the noise. For info on why and how to do that, we have a separate video for you. And now I can even increase the sharpness a bit. Let me zoom in a bit to see the noise. In the dark areas, it is definitely visible, but I would have had to raise the ISO to around 4000 on location to get a similar brightness. That too would have created a lot of noise, and I would have lost all the details in the highlights, which would have been a pity. Plus, many photographers edit their images for Instagram, which is mainly viewed on small screens. You would not see any noise on these. If you're watching from a smartphone or a tablet, you probably don't see any noise now either. Does that now mean you have to completely rethink photography? Well, yes and no. If you're striving for the images you see in magazines, you should consider. If you're happy the way your images turn out, then of course not. But keeping that info in mind may save you the one or the other shot. There are other techniques like HDR that will achieve similar results, but I myself very often use the technique described above. Let me know whether you think the original image was badly exposed, or if maybe having my edit in mind it was clever to underexpose. One last thing, make sure you know your camera. Not all cameras will let you save the shadows as much as mine does. Let me encourage you to do some tests and experiments to get to know your camera. And now, don't forget to subscribe because I will be back.